When you finish a screenplay, what is the standard protocol of steps you'll go through after it's done?
Well, I don't know.
Well, the first thing is to figure out when it's done.
Yes.
And so after you finish the first draft, it's very sad when you're new to the job and you finish your first draft and you think it's done, and of course the first draft you're not even close to being done.
Yeah, the end is often the beginning.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But so the first thing that you do is you put it aside for a little bit, and then you reread it. And I tend to give it I read it through several times. For one, I read it through to see, does the plot have drive? I'm just focusing on the plot. Are there any big holes? Does the piping go together? The next thing is I'll read it through each character and say, am I following the journey of this character? Oh my gosh, how did she find that out? Why is she reacting to something she was never told? You know, things like that. You find out those things, or suddenly you lose sight of the character. They're suddenly kind of falling flat. And so you start to say, okay, what is the investment in their journey? You clarify each character and you make sure that they're consistent throughout and their voice is consistent throughout. And the final pass is a theme pass, where let's say your theme is you really can't do anything completely alone. You can't live your life alone and lead a productive life. And then you'll be going along and suddenly another scene says, oh, you should bootstrap yourself up. And well, that's a valid thing to say, stand on your own 2 feet, but if it's in the same movie, you're suddenly jarred. So the ideal, you can't do it every time, but the ideal is to advance, in each scene, you advance plot and character and theme. Each scene should advance those 3 things. And if a particular scene seems to be falling flat, usually one of those things has been left out. And so I read for those 3 things. And when that feels pretty good, and I've put it aside, then what we try and have is like a reading, where we sit around the table and you read it, and then you hear things that you hadn't heard before. So basically, it's that you start testing the waters with it, and at first it's like difficult because you think you've finished, but if you have a little bit of experience, then the 5th draft is far much more fun than the first draft. Because you start to discover things, you start to develop resonances and connective tissue, and you've done the plumbing, the real hard work is done, or let's say the technical work, and so that's where the fun work starts, where you can really hone moments that you hadn't seen in the beginning. And so I think, for me, it's never done until final post-edit, because you're still finding things and seeing things. So and the actors are discovering things, and you discover things in the editing process. So done is a very tricky word.
Well, also there's another factor is you have to make sure with the script that the main character is driving it. So in other words, you have to be very careful that the supporting characters aren't the main character, that the main character isn't passive. Very important. And also there's always a question of am I writing this script to sell it, or am I writing this script to make it? Those are 2 totally different objectives. And there's also a reading draft. So in other words, with some scripts I've written, I'll write them where they're entertaining reads. So in other words, the description is as entertaining as the dialogue, because someone's going to be sitting and reading it and you want them to be entertained and delighted and ideally buy the script. But there's other drafts that you're writing to shoot. Like for instance with Space Command, I know I'm going to be shooting it, that Elaine and I are going to be directing it, and that we're producing it. So then it's about, well, okay, how are we going to build this? How are we going to design this? Who am I hiring to do this role? So I'm writing it for one of the things I do is, whenever I write a script, I cast it in my mind. If it's certain actors I know I'm going to be hiring, I'll cast them. Or sometimes it'll be actors who are just very distinctive in my head, or people from my life who are very distinctive in my head. And then I'll print out little photos of them, and I'll put them in a strip, and I'll put them on the computer in front of me, so that when I'm writing, I can look at that person's face and I can hear them in my head. And that makes it come alive. But often when I'm writing nowadays, see, right now in my life I have zero interest in development. I'm not writing scripts to be put into development and never made. I'm not writing scripts. I'm here to make stuff. So that's why I did Space Command the way I've done it, and gone directly to my audience. So for me, it's very much okay. We're going to be shooting this. So how do we make the costumes? How do we build the sets? What's going to make these look interesting? This is where my art background comes in very handy, because I love working with visual designers and all of that. And but like one of the things we have, a challenge we have right now is for the second film, we've shot 30 minutes of it. We have the rest of it to shoot, and that takes place on an alien spaceship, a sleeper ship. 300 people have been abducted by an alien creature and put in hibernation. So it's like, okay, well that's interesting, because first of all, how do we do it so it looks different from anything we've ever seen? How can we utilize perhaps what we have already? And how can we make it look very, very interesting? So we recently put some of our sets in storage, so we're not paying the overhead on a sound stage, because we had our own physical studio for several years. And so I saw we have a cave set. And in the first Space Command film, the first 2-hour story, that cave set was used for a mining operation on Ceres, which is a planetoid in the asteroid belt. It was used for Mars colony, and it was used, I guess that's that. And then in the second film, we used it for ice caverns on Mercury. It's ice, because there's actually a crater on Mercury it's so deep that there's ice at the bottom of it. This is real. This is a true scientific fact. The sun never melts the ice. And so I posited having a city made of ice. Mercury has a lot of iron on it, so so we have this religious commune that mines the iron and ships it to the outer planets. And so they're there, and they have a city in the ice. So we used our cave set for the ice cavern. So I thought, well, we could take that cave set, turn it sideways, paint it black, run LED lights along it, put oblong amber pieces of lucite in it, have that be the sleeper cells, do forced perspective to make it look like there's 300 of them, and bang, we've got an alien spaceship. So now we're starting to think about how to design that.
But in terms of like the writing, and what he said, what was important in terms of the hero, that it has to be the hero's journey.
Yes.
Because people make a lot of mistake with their leads. They try and make them too shiny bright, and so they're boring, and all we want to see is the villain, right? We've all seen those movies. And you start giving too many of the fun lines to your subsidiary characters.
Right.
And you don't really think through, one, the power of the lead, and really say, okay, what if he were actually human and not all polished and perfect? Mm-hmm. Because we all secretly hate those people, right? and so what really is the struggle? There's the external stuff, but you also have to give them the internal stuff. What are the insecurities? What are the demons? All these things. And are we really is that journey core where we'll really get on board with this guy? And do we really like this man and have his journey? So, I fell afoul of like giving my little side characters too much fun, like with the one that the script doctor gave me all these notes. There was one little character where I gave him so much fun stuff, and it kept slipping more and more over to the hero, more and more, until finally when my agent read it, he said, I really like it, but what's this character doing in here? I said, oh, nothing anymore. Mm. And so my favorite character was plucked out, right, because he didn't really belong, because it wasn't about him, it wasn't about his journey, it was about the struggle of the two leads in this particular piece. So some of it is to really say, what am I trying to say, and why have I selected this character to take the journey with, and what will I love about him? Right. One of my favorite films, which many people haven't seen because I'm older, is a thing called Marty. And the hero was an ugly butcher, like the writer. The writer saw himself as ugly, from New York. Petty-Chayefsky. Oh. Mm-hmm. And he wasn't, but that's how he perceived himself. And so what is the heroic journey of this character? The heroic journey of this character is simply, in the end, to stand against peers and family, to go on a quest for love, because he just wants someone to love him. Mm-hmm. And people are mom doesn't want to be left alone, and the friends don't want to be, feel like losers because their friend is married. Just well-meaning people, but in the end they were like standing in opposition to him finding someone that he really loved. Right. And we can see that it took immense courage to stand against your peers and to stand against your family. So it was small, but it's huge, it's core. And so I found that an immensely touching piece, that this man who is past marriageable age fought to find something that he really, really wanted. And but he was full of flaws. He was afraid. He was easily swayed. He was easily embarrassed. But he was a sweet and honorable man, and he found love. And I found that an extremely heroic piece of writing. Mm-hmm. So,
because we have our own studio now, the final draft of the script is actually the final cut of the film. So we basically will write something, bring together our actors, shoot it, and then refine it in the cut. And so we love the fact that allows us to refine the story, refine the script, refine what we had in mind. And often there'll be discoveries along the way. So we love the entire part of the process. And a big part of it is just when you meet brilliant, wonderful people, collect them, absorb them, have them become part of your team. That's what I've done with actors. That's what I've done with our editor, who's terrific. You know, we just find incredibly talented people, and it's not about, as Elaine said earlier, you can't be a one-man band. If you wanted to be the end-all and the be-all, be a novelist, because they can sit in their room, they can write, they can be these pale, sad creatures. But if you're in film and TV, it takes hundreds of people, and then you need to really be a leader, have a vision, be kind to your people, be supportive of them. If you're a monster, if you're a nightmare, life's too short. You know, you want to treat people well.
Your actors create a world, your DP creates a world, your set designer creates a world.
Right, but one thing I want to mention is our job as directors. See, Elaine is a better director than I am, so you know, she's an actor's director, and so we're very strong together as directors. We don't disagree on the set because we have the same vision, but our job is to make a safe place for our actors so they can be vulnerable, they can be in the moment. Our job is to give them the room to do what they need to do, which is find honesty and authenticity. And so we see very much eye to eye on that.
Yeah, they have a very hard job because they have to, you know, when you're writing, you have to like say, oh, this woman was betrayed, and you have to live through that betrayal once. But you expect your performer to do it over and over and over and really feel it and really be in the moment. And that's really, really hard. You have to be like an Olympian. You have to be trained, have your emotions trained like an Olympic runner, that you can keep summoning that over and over. It's terrible to have an actor sobbing and say, hold for sound, hold for sound. I mean, that's a terrible thing, but a really well-trained actor can do that, can pull it out over.
Well, that's why actors have to be in class, they have to be working on their craft, they have to be able to turn it on like that, to be able to do it over and over and over. So, yeah, but yeah.
You had said something earlier about when you did the Space Command auditions and you really saw people own the character. What is that when you see, maybe you don't see it at first in that same actor for that character, and then there's a switch. What is that owning? How do you tell?
Well, the owning of the character is that they seem to be profoundly and deeply inside the character. And for actors, they know about the thing about where either you're looking outside at yourself and saying, this character's supposed to be angry. I think I'll clench my fists and I'll tighten my mouth and I'll be angry. And that always comes across as phony. But when somebody owns it, it doesn't matter what they're doing with their body or their face. Inside, they're very angry. And one take it may come out loud, one quietly, but the camera really sees your eyes, sees it in your eyes.
Well, they're in the moment, they're feeling it.
They're actually feeling it completely in the moment, and that's when you say they're owning it, because what they're doing with, I mean, their hands will naturally tense, but it doesn't mean they'll be doing this kind of thing. It means that you will, when they feel it, you feel it. When they don't feel it, you don't feel it, at least not in the same way. And I've had, you know, I've tested that out with actors and classes. When were they feeling it? And the class will say, at this time they were feeling it. Go to the actor and say, when were you feeling it? It was always the same. The camera sees when it's real for you, and that's owning the character. And you often bring, a really fine actor brings a tremendous amount of their own background and experience to it. So they not just own it, but the moment, but they own it in complex ways. There's sense memories and fears, and if they're supposed to be betrayed, they remember when they were two, somebody mocking them and not being able to stop the tears. And all of that actually comes across in the moment on screen.